Hey everybody, welcome back. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these hobby logs, so I figured I'd just start off by saying that I've actually had quite a bit of a reorientation, let's call it, in terms of my hobby priorities. So I've actually um, stopped playing 10th edition altogether. I've not gotten one game in the past, I think it's been about 8 weeks since the last hobby log. Instead, I've been getting very much into Old World. You'll probably see it when we start talking through my hobby projects over the past little bit, where I've been participating in this fantastic Old World community. I've been starting this slow grow league, and I've gotten a pretty nice little 500 point army of beastmen. And the other main thing, which I decided on over the past little bit, is I think I'm going to sell off all my armies, namely my orcs. So with the 11th edition update, which actually got posted, I think, less than a week ago, we got our first reveals and our first look at that Orc Boy and New Intercessor. And while they look great, I honestly think I might want to go for a bit of a different scheme with my orcs. And honestly, the fact that I'm just not playing the game so much at the moment, I feel like this is a good time to bow out and sell off those models. And obviously, I'll be able to recoup the money I invested into them, plus a little bit more. But more importantly, it's gonna open up space for me, right? My living situation here is probably scheduled to change. I'm currently undergoing some personal shakeups. However, I still don't have a huge amount of space. I don't have a huge amount of display room. So I do want to, maybe trim back, maybe neaten up. And I feel like the mass quality of orcs, I've got like, I think over 90 models or something that I'm planning to sell. Meaning, obviously selling off all of those, that's gonna free up quite a bit of room for new armies and some future projects I'm working on here in the near future. So yeah, I've mainly been rushing to get some of my orcs painted and working on getting into Old World. So I wrote down quite a few of my projects over this past little period, and these are not necessarily in order of completion, just sort of the arbitrarily or just the sort of arbitrary order as I went through and catalog stuff. So actually, a model that I started painting on stream quite recently was this war boss in mega armor. Now this guy, I went for quite a different look on his skin. Over time, my freebooters have actually been getting more and more out there in terms of the color, right? You can see the more saturated blues and yellows working their way in. And then this war boss, I not only kept with that theme, but I really like the idea of my orcs being a little bit more green as they go up in eliteness, right? I go for a little bit more of a desaturated skin tone. Then I did these knobs maybe a few years back. My theming for these guys, right? Because this army is a freebooters army. I like the idea that these knobs and this war boss came from a clan of Goths, right? And they sort of mutinied and took control of these freebooters. And they obviously adopted some of their ways and patterns, but they still have a lot of that Goth influence. They're a little bit less garish. And I like the sort of idea that as the orc ages, they go their skin gets more vividly green as it gets saturated with spores as they become more sort of potent and powerful. Sort of like a similar idea to black orcs in fantasy. However, instead of their skin becoming like over pigmented, it just sort of gets that nice vivid green hue. And I like this in theory. I kind of hate the way this model looks. It's a little bit too far. I think it's really important when you're working on these hobby projects to always push the envelope a little bit and then see what the eventual effect is, to always experiment with your paint jobs. However, there's going to be times like this where you go a bit for normal and it doesn't work out. However, I'm still happy with this guy. Or happy is not quite the right word. However, he's a really cool model. I like that I got to maybe go in the direction of my orc scheme that I didn't with some of the others, and I'm happy for that experience. And he was overall a really quick and kind of dirty paint job. However, I think he still has a great presence on the table, and obviously the sculpt is just insane, especially compared to the Mega Knobs we have now. Makes me really hope we see some new Mega Knob reveals, either in the launch box or more likely, probably a little bit later on the second wave of orcs. That's likely coming a little bit into 11th. So, I guess just also doing another orc unit, I have 3 killicans here. So these guys are also in that somewhat more brightly colored aesthetic. However, because there's still a lot of metallics and you get that brown of the wood, I think these guys came out fantastically. And then just to be clear, these are actually a 3D printed model from Station Forge. I am a pretty big fan of a lot of their range, specifically their Pirate Orcs. Fit very, very well for freebooters, right? And I very much like these sculpts. I did do a little bit of manipulation on some of the arms here, but for the most part, they're basically just the models that you get there, and I think it really fits, especially with the wood paneling that I do on these bases, right? That matches perfectly with these sort of like cool like barrel bodies they have. I think these guys look great. I'm really super happy with these guys. Honestly, this was one of the models and one of the projects that made me really regret my decision to leave orcs behind. But yeah, I'm super happy with these guys. So actually, last year I ended up picking up this Black Templars combat troll. I've talked about this before on the channel. Really cool box, and it has a Emperor's Champion. Problem is, I already have an Emperor's Champion from the Black Templars army set that came out all the way back in 9th when the Black Templars first got their new range. So I didn't really need a second one. If I was going to get a second Emperor's Champion, I probably want to do the pose a little bit different. So I was thinking of maybe green stuffing his arm, maybe messing with the legs a little bit to resemble that sort of classic Juan Diaz Emperor's Champion model. However, I ended up thinking it would also be really cool to make this guy into a Master of Executions for my CSM. So my idea for this guy is he's actually a Keeper of Sacrifices. The idea is that when the Synod, captures some of their enemies, this is the guy that's going to be in charge of sacrificing them into the Dark God in such a way to generate the most chaotic power, right? So I quite like him. He has a cool, sinister look to him, and I think it really didn't take a lot to transform the classic Emperor's Champion silhouette into something that is obviously very much its own. It does obviously at the lower half. You look at the body; it obviously is um, derived from that same model. Though I think if unless you were very familiar and you've probably had some hands-on experience with them all, you probably wouldn't be able to even tell what it was kishbashed from. So I've actually got quite a bit of work done on my Black Templars. One of the very, very first things up on this channel was my very first YouTube short of 5 Infernus Marines, along with a Castellan, sort of like a homebrew lieutenant equivalent for the Templars. And I still had 5 more from Leviathan, so I just went ahead and painted them. They did come out a little bit different. However, my challenge with these guys, at least my challenge to myself here, was to paint them as quickly as possible. And I actually did a really good job at that. Like, these guys took me, I think I got them done within maybe 6 hours, which at least for me is very, very good. I got them done in basically the course of like a day. Right, I got back from work, I worked on these guys, and I managed to get them done in a single night, which I think is, at least for me, fantastic. And I'm quite happy with how they turned out. I think obviously they are a little different to the first 5, but I think they fit decently enough that when you mix them into a squad, they obviously are very much the same unit. Also, just following up from last update, I was in the midst of working on a big 10-man brick of Terminators. So obviously a lot of that painting was being done all the way back in January. However, through February, I did the finishing touches on these guys, and they came out great. I'm super happy with this scheme. I think for all the rest of my squad going forward, like you can probably see on next year, we're going to talk about. I went for a full yellow arm, and I really, really like the way that looks over just the yellow shoulder pad. And it's a little weird to bring a new element and sort of change the scheme halfway through, but I'm kind of okay, right? Uh, I For a lot of my armies, I'm okay with some amount of disunity, especially for Templars. I think it gives them, if anything, a little bit more character. If not every unit has the exact same markings. However, I do love that full yellow arm, especially with how plain and like stark the armor of the new Terminators is. I actually did want to initially do some like tabards and like cloths, very similar to a Contemptor that I worked on. However, it was going to take a lot of time, especially for a 10-man, so I decided against it just in favor of getting them all done. I kind of like the way they look without it, right? I feel like the white would sort of kill their eliteness, right? I like how the black and the red looks here. I feel like even the red would maybe a little too much. I like how clean they are, right? They stand a little bit apart from a lot of the other Templars, and it gives them a very sort of sleek design, but doesn't go too far away, something like a Phobos Brain does. It gives them a very different feel when you compare it to maybe Sword Brothers, like I do in my other Crusade, right? Whereas this Crusade, their elites are these really nice looking Terminators. And then I also did a 3-man of Blade Guard. I kept the full yellow arm, and I really like how these guys came out. I actually did quite a bit of the painting for these guys on stream. Not all of it, but if you go back, you probably find some of the VOD still up there. These guys are quite similar to the Terminators in terms of the process and the application of the paint. Basically all the same steps. Obviously a little bit more fine detail in these guys, all those like little purity seals and the like. However, they also came up pretty quick. I'm quite happy with the head I did on this guy, and I do like them as a point of comparison because I actually did a 3-man of Blade Guard for my other Crusade. And let me just go on a tangent. I actually have 2 different Black Templar armies. One is the more sort of traditional Templar look, and the other one is this Kildronian Crusade army. I have some homebrew lore for them. I'm not going to go into it now, but they have sort of Imperial Fist iconography, and I typically don't even field them with Black Templar specific units. Like all the units they have um, are typically just basic Codex Space Marines units, and then I bounce around between fielding them either as Templars or as Imperial Fists. And then finally, for one of my major focuses over this past little bit, it's been my Beastmen. So I still don't have too much fully painted for my Beastmen. I've quite a bit primed. I've been sourcing 3D prints. I've been assembling and buying models. However, over the past 2 months, I managed to get 20 gore painted, 10 ungore, and a Bray Shaman. The Bray Shaman is a 3D print. I'll make sure to put the link to that on screen now. I'm very happy with the way the Bray Shaman came out. It's a very different look from a lot of the official models, although it gives him a cool sort of sinister vibe. And even though I went for a very, I guess, bright green and like sort of like brighter skin tone fur color, I do like how there is still a sort of sinister vibe to him, even with his sort of baby blue pajamas he's wearing beneath there, right? His little robe. It still feels malicious, which is something I like with the Beastman, right? That sort of balance there. Um, Another thing is how easy these guys were to assemble. Just in terms of speed, right? Because it is the head, all of the heads for the gores at least come in 2 pieces, right? It's the horns and then the head itself, and then it's simply 1 piece for the entire legs and body, and then 1 piece for each of the arms. It meant assembling these guys was super easy. And also batch painting, like batch painting 20 gores was surprisingly like not that bad. Because usually when I batch paint, I try to do 5, maybe 10 guys if I know I'm going to be able to dedicate a lot of time and energy to that project. I was able to do 20 guys, and honestly was not too bad. Ungor also came together pretty easy, and were pretty quick to paint up. And I have a pretty decent scheme. I just now need to experiment with that scheme and figure out how to apply to some of my bigger monsters. Because going forward, I've got some Razor Gores I'm printing out, I've got some Minotaurs I need to print out, and I just bought some Bestigores. Meanwhile, I still have a Gorgon from the Battalion box. I got 20 more Ungore, and I got 10 more Gore. I'm trying not to go too much in gameplay here. However, I've been loving the way Beastmen play. Specifically the Ungore, I'm surprisingly just loving having these like sort of easy to maneuver skirmishers that always seem to punch up for their weight class. And then obviously just the Bray Shaman. I very quickly discovered the power of Vile Tide and why it's probably one of the scariest spells in the game. And yeah, I've honestly just been loving playing some Old World. So beyond that, my goals going forward are going to be to continue to keep up with the Progression League for Old World and probably try and accelerate them, try and get some 1,000, maybe even some 2,000 games in a little bit earlier. Earlier than scheduled, just because I am liking that game so much. I've actually am planning even a second army that may require some 3D modeling and sculpting. I may do some videos on that in the future. It's actually I wanted to do a Renegade Crowns army, and somewhat theme it around Glenn Cook's Black Company novels, sort of like weird conquistador meets I guess for a 40k Warhammer reference it would be like a Maccabi and Janissary, and I think they have a really cool look about them, and it will give me some. Obviously, it's black armor again, but I would want to try some black metallic over it. Uh, it would maybe be a bit similar to Templars, but I'm already have a few ideas in mind for that particular scheme. Yeah, so beyond that, let me just compare really quickly the schedule we made at the very start of this channel for this year. Unfortunately, we are not cut up for February. I have still a Marshal to paint. I still have company heroes that need to be painted, and I have a Castellan. Additionally, for March, I have a Terminator Captain. So that is 7 character models I need to get painted. Additionally, into April, I've got Apothecary Biologist. So that's basically 8 Space Marine characters I need to get painted. Funnily enough, I actually did redo my Apothecary Biologist. With those new Crucible of Battle rules, I actually converted him, gave him a sort of different arm and head option, just to give him a little bit more flavor than the old one had. I thought that would be cool. And yeah, so currently we're quite a bit behind. Technically, I do have a lot of these Terminators done. I obviously have those Infernus done. I just need that Castellan to go with them. But yeah, I've been really lagging behind on these characters. And there's also the aspect that a lot of the Orcs models that I am currently painting, I kind of forgot I had. I went through some old storage boxes, and I realized I had some model sprues in there, and that's mostly what I've been paying when it comes to the War Boss Mega Armor and some of the extra boys. So those aren't even accounted for in my initial plans. We're at the point where that first hobby log I recorded back in January, we were like on track, and at this point, over the past 2 months, I've basically completely deviated from that initial plan. There's definitely room to still catch up here, to the point where I may have some extra painting time, some extra time to dedicate to this channel, and there's also obviously the whole predictions I made regarding the contents of the box, which at least at the time of recording, still have not been revealed. I assume it's going to be next week, but still, it's a fun thought experiment. I also am unsure of what my next Orcs army is going to look like in terms of scheme. So I'll have to do some brainstorming, and probably hopefully next hobby log I will have an update regarding that. And now, just to finish off, here are all the models I have painted all together. And just one note is that a lot of these Orcs that you see here will no longer be in my possession come next hobby log. So it's unfortunately time to say goodbye. But you can see that's a pretty prodigious amount that I have managed to do over these past 3 months. And for only being the first quarter of 2026, I'm really happy with my output. I think this is about as many models as I've painted most other years, already done the first couple months. So that's cool, and I'm happy to be beginning potentially a new chapter, getting rid of the Orcs, and potentially working on either new projects or just getting some new Orcs in with the 11th edition. And I think that's it for me. Make sure to post a comment, let me know what you've been working on, and I hopefully will see you sooner rather than later.